Welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel, Conversations from the Front Line, a podcast and live show for survivors and the leaders who support them. I'm your host, Kelly Humphries, a survivor of child sexual abuse, advocate, author, speaker, ambassador, a lover of all things outdoors, with over 15 years of law enforcement experience. Please support me in my mission to break cycles of abuse and trauma. You can help by donating to my Patreon account at patreon.com/Kelly Humphries. Good evening, guys. How are you? Welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel. I have my amazing guest here, Scott McLaughlin. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Kel. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So Scotty and I have been chatting all this week, and we've had some massive conversations. So I've got a bit of ADHD brain, and so I don't like to sit still for too long. So we had nearly a 2-hour conversation the other day about some very big topics. So I'm sure we're going to have an incredible evening, having some big conversations tonight. So Scotty is a business strategist. He's a data expert and does some really crazy things behind the scenes. But we are very excited to have him with us tonight. So Scotty, from the beginning, if I could, tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, my dad was a baseball player and athlete, and I kind of, I think I had my first game of t-ball when I was 3, so I was always down in the ballpark. I was super. I spoke to my mother about this quite a lot lately. I was really enamored with like toys, like puzzles, right?
Yeah.
This. I don't think they'd sell these today because it's probably jammy fingers, but yeah, it's and I was always, according to Mum, like really besotted with educational toys and trying to figure things out and stuff like that. So, but beyond that, yeah, it was all about baseball. It was all about sport. It was all about how much I could participate and be like my dad, really. So
yeah, it sounds like from what I'm learning about you, which is an enigma in itself, is your complex thinking, which I just cannot fathom. So you've obviously I just wait till Scott tells you what he does later. Oh my god. Yeah, so very exciting. But yeah, so you started off obviously with humble roots, it sounds like, and a heart to play sport. I love that.
Yeah.
So,
Brisbane, Vegas.
Brisbane,
yeah.
Okay.
Brisbane, Vegas, all about baseball. It was such a beautiful community. At Windsor's there in Brisbane, and yeah, I don't know. I just have so many fond memories of running around with my little uniform on and trying to be like the big guy,
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we spoke this week about your experience, which obviously very difficult. But well, firstly, why don't you tell us a little bit about that if you can, and then we'll go back to the question I just wanted to ask you. So.
What do you mean my experience? My experience in terms of
CSE
correct.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I was 12 years of age. We had a babysitter come and stay, and I recall my sister being rushed off early-ish to bed, and then this woman, girl, 18 or so, took advantage of me, and I remember feeling like I was pinned down on the ground, and I was kind of fight or flight. Like I froze, and I was very perplexed about that from there on in, to be honest. So
yeah. So obviously, at that point in time, you didn't really sort of know what was happening. You're only 12.
No, not really. Not at all. Yeah, not at all. And a few days later, I remember speaking to my dad about it, and I don't even know how I described it, to be fair. I mean, it was 1983 in Brisbane, so we were kind of a bit rough and tumble, right? So
yeah,
maybe I described it like it was a conquest or something. I don't know, but my dad's a particularly lovely man, and he kind of took it like I had a win, and he said to me, "Good on you, buddy. Did you wear a condom?" And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
So yeah, from there on in, it was kind of confusing, right? So for the next 30 years,
Yeah.
for the next 30 years, I thought I'd done something good.
Yeah, right. And so I guess, did you ever have a conversation with your dad again after that?
Only last year.
Yeah, right.
Only last year, and it was pretty emotional. It was pretty full on. He didn't really understand, why I was upset about his response, but and he kind of, to be fair, he kind of said, "Well, mate, come on, shit happens. Like, let's get over it,"
That's
kind
right.
of thing. And about 4 days later, I had a fit, actually. So I had like a non-epileptic fit. So they call it psychosomatic. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion, right?
Yeah, right.
But I can't reiterate enough how much of a good man my dad is.
Yeah.
But he didn't know what to do at the time, I guess. So.
And that's the thing. I think we've changed a lot. The world has changed a lot. It's still got a long way to go about these conversations, but I fully acknowledge your courage in sharing that. So thank you for doing that, Scotty.
Yeah, cool. Like I said, I mean, I imagine being in his shoes, going, what's going on?
Yeah, and going, oh, what do I do with this? Oh my god. So
Yeah.
did you talk to anyone else about it at the time besides your dad?
No, I never told my mum. In fact, I told my mum last year for the first time, and that was really emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I kept it to myself for 30 odd years.
Yeah. What was your reasoning behind not talking to your mum about it back then? I mean, you told your dad.
No, it was sexual. It was sexual. So I didn't want to talk to my mum about sexual things. I guess.
Yeah.
She was my mum. Like, so, yeah. I just that felt like a barrier I couldn't cross. Right.
Yeah. I guess I asked that. I mean, I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted to ask because there's a lot of people that, don't have anyone to talk to, and it's really hard to identify, I think, for a lot of men what some of those barriers are. So I fully acknowledge how difficult it is for men to, I would say, come out of the closet, that's not the right word, but to share their experiences, because there's such a bloody stigma about frigging trying to be so tough about everything.
True, and like I said to you last Friday, like such a confusing time, because at 12 years of age, and then fast forward 2 years, I'm playing sport with men in Brisbane, and I'm 14 years of age, and I'm in amongst like a totally different cultural set, like a mind-blowing, like catapult into adulthood, right? And so those 2 years before just kind of got left behind a little bit, and I was pushed on. And I was pretty aggressive, and I was pretty, pretty vocal for a young fella. But yeah, I felt like I had to fight, and that's what I did. And yeah, it was only 2 years beyond that incident, which is really quite, when your innocence is like taken from you, and then all of a sudden you got to be a man. Yeah, man, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. It was tough.
I think I understand. I mean, not from the perspective, because I'm not a man, but like I guess what I relate that to is the fact that when a child had that experience so early, like the innocence of that experience is gone completely, and you just see things through completely different eyes. Like for me, like I know I questioned, like, is this person my uncle? God, I mean, your person was not a familial abuse, obviously, but obviously someone known to you that you trusted, and my uncle, I think was one of the journalists from one of the magazines, was the first person to ask me, and I just was like, oh my god. But he's like, did you feel like that he was like your boyfriend? Is that what it felt like to you? And I was like, yeah.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to have a boyfriend when I'm like 8. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. But in my mind, I was forced to have to think like an adult. And, we forget as children that we don't have the capacity to make adult decisions. Like we're just trying to make adult decisions with our child brains.
Yeah. And it's funny, like when I think about that incident, I was sort of grateful that my sister was put to bed and she wasn't involved. And I don't know, it's bizarre, isn't it? But I just thought it was so cool that she wasn't involved at all and she wasn't exposed to anything.
Yeah.
Because she's my little sister. So, but yeah, for me, look, it's deeply impacted my life on so many facets, particularly with regard to relationships and trust and wow, man, it's been really hard.
So what are some of those things? Because I obviously, like, unhealed childhood trauma leads to adult trauma. Basically, that's how I look at it. If we don't deal with this stuff early on, it leads to some really poor patterns of behavior as we move forward. And I've made lots of mistakes out of my own trauma and not doing the right thing for myself.
Yeah.
So
I'd definitely say trust in relationships has been, like, interestingly, like I chose earlier in my life to have really safe relationships, like people that had very small social circles, people that didn't really, I don't know, there were very small odds of being a threat to me.
Yeah.
But those people bored the shit out of me. But nonetheless, they were safe, right? And then it wasn't until my 40s that I actually went, here's someone who's intelligent, charismatic, educated, blah, blah, blah. I want to be with her. And I flat out couldn't deal with it. I flat out couldn't deal with the risk, the potential hurt, the fact that she could break my heart. And I went stir crazy. And that's when I went into therapy and started talking about what happened to me.
Well, at least you recognize it
in my early 40s. I remember laying in bed with her going, there's something wrong with me. There's something not right. Something's not right. Yeah.
How did you figure that out, though? What was it that made you think that? What was the turning point?
I feel like I could see the lack of logic in my lack of trust. I could see that it was beyond, it was past crazy, if that makes sense. I could see that it was like taking control of me.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't being rational.
Yeah. I was going to say completely irrational. I know the feeling.
Yeah, completely irrational, right?
Yeah.
And I could see that. It was like taking me away, right? And I was like, shit, I don't have a handle on this.
Mm. Yeah, I totally. I think we talked a little bit about it in our conversation earlier, but like it's that whole, like you get to this point where you're actually doing really well, but really well feels really scary, right? So it's not safe anymore to actually like do something really brilliant or successful or be successful or have a great relationship with somebody. All of a sudden we're doing shit to sabotage it because we don't feel like we honestly deserve those things. Like it's totally
wow.
Yeah,
that's so true. That is so true.
We persecute ourselves because we don't believe within ourselves that we deserve that full love and completeness and to have these healthy relationships because we're so used to chaotic bullshit, right? And so we create chaos because that's what feels safe. And I know that sounds kind of fucking around the wrong way, but that's what it is for most people. We live in this hypervigilant state all the time, question everybody's motives. Like, you're like strung up all the time. It's any wonder I got bloody crow's feet.
It's I remember being in a strategy meeting with a guy a couple of years ago, and he's like, I do strategy like in completeness, right? I am incredibly vigilant about all aspects of strategy. And I did this session with this guy, and he's like, how the fuck did you do that? And I went, I reckon it's probably, just childhood childhood abuse, really. I think that's probably what it is, really. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's probably what it is. Yeah, it's probably what it is.
You know, I totally agree, because do you know that I say this all the time, people like trauma can rob workplaces of people's abilities, right? But I really believe if workplaces understand people's trauma, they can actually use their skills to help their business so much more, because people who've experienced trauma are like the most hypervigilant, risk-averse people that you could possibly meet, right? You know what all the things that could go wrong are. You make sure that you know every like bad thing that's going to happen. You can like, you know who the wrong people are that are walking around into a room. You can tell just from body language when something bad's going to go up. So they're the mediators. They're the, you know, like I always have to sit in the corner of the room and make sure I can see everybody walking in. You know, like we're the most risk averse, strategic thinkers, because like if this happens, then we're going to do this, and if this happens, well, I'm going to make sure that this.
Absolutely.
You know, like, so anyone who's out there has got you can turn your pain into something really powerful. I can tell you.
Well, yeah. I mean, childhood trauma is it's a superpower in some ways. So you know, my approach to strategy is, thankfully, to my Mr. Miyagi, Dr. Colin Benjamin, I have learnt models about strategy and about how to think about how we think. And
what are the shapes you've got hiding in there? I mean, come on.
I know it's quite funny. I said to a friend of mine the other day, I haven't come that far, but yeah, I mean, we think about completeness and about getting every possible aspect of what might happen, right? And which is why I do what I do with data, because you know, it's about what we see and what we don't see. And it's about that hypervigilance that actually creates that modeling capability to find the unfindable. And all that's birthed by trauma. All of that is birthed by trauma. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, I can see that. And you've done some of the stuff that I've been learning about what you do is just incredible. So I say congratulations for turning something terrible into something tangible that can be used by people for something really powerful. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like we're you know, we're forecasting, you know, food relief requirements around the country for Oz Harvest, Second Bite, and Food Bank, and you know, it feels good. It feels good to use incredibly sophisticated modeling to, you know, to help people in need. So, and now turning that into, you know, CSE work. Wow, that's really exciting for me, as you can imagine. Like I'm just whoa, super pumped about that.
Well, while we're talking about it, might as well tell our listeners a little bit about what you do with that while we're on the topic.
Well, okay, so I'm going to share an opinion. And my opinion is that we are better off educating children to avoid and avert situations where they might fall into CSE than we are in trying to capture pedophiles. Why do I say that? Because it's the fastest growing crime in the world. And if we can educate our kids, we can stop supply and stop worrying about demand, right? So that's my first belief. Secondly, we can see the kinds of kids that are more likely to fall into that situation. It'll be socioeconomic, it'll be family constructs, it'll be, you know, household constructs, it'll be a whole range of things that will reliably predict that they are more likely to be at risk, right?
Yeah.
And working with the Queensland Police, we're trying to get to that point where we can actually isolate that and get into geographies where we can educate children who are most at risk, right? On the flip side of that, yeah, the behaviours, yeah, it's pretty clear. And using an awful lot of data, we can isolate. Not only do we believe we can isolate pedophiles, but we can isolate pedophiles in situ. So we believe that as their anxiety grows through the process, so to speak, we'll be able to anticipate that based on their consumer behaviour. So it's super exciting. Yeah, it's a bit out there. It's a bit out there. But
yeah, but it's
I mean,
very cool.
we do, because if they're in situ with a child, we know from case studies that their anxiety will go up. So if we, say for instance that the person's a cigarette smoker, they'll probably, the frequency of their purchasing will increase, and we'll go, oh, Frank's in situ, which brings us closer to an arrest, right? So that's what we're really working for.
Yeah, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, we've obviously done a lot with your work and your story, and to me, like, I've never felt better than when I'm like fully giving myself to my vision, and that's obviously to do stuff like this, to break open these conversations and to really bring this into the light. And I just think I feel like that's my calling, right? I don't have a choice about it. So
Yeah. No, I get it. And I think, I feel the same way. I mean, as much as a mate of mine who's a detective in Brisbane has always said to me, he goes, "You're just a one-hit wonder, Scotty." And it's true, I am. I wasn't groomed. I wasn't groomed over a series of years or anything like that. But at the same time, I have an experience, and I know what it's like to be vulnerable, and I know what it's like to be taken advantage of, and hell, my daughter's 13, right? So it's like the last 12 months I've noticed in me the triggering for me has been like really full on. Where is she? What's she doing? It's been really full on, because hey, that was my time, right?
Yeah.
And God, my plight is to make sure she's safe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't imagine how difficult that would be, because well, my partner and I, my 13-year-old stepdaughter, and she's the most lovely looking thing, and I swear to God, I'm like, anything ever happened to her, I'll be like, oh my goodness, But yeah, it's tough, and I know a lot of parents, don't know what to do. There's so much social media out there. There's so much like drawing the attention of the children, and it's very hard to stay on top of everything all the time. Like, trying to protect your kids is a full-time job.
Well, yeah, and you get to a point. I was talking to some of the guys from Argos about bark.us. If you've seen that before, have you seen that, Kel?
No, I'll have to write that down.
It's a really cool, it's a really cool app. It came out of the US, and if you put it on your kid's mobile, it will detect whether there's bullying, sexting, anything kind of problematic, right? But my kid's too old.
Yeah, right.
So she's 13. I'm like, oh, do you mind if I put an app on your phone? She's like, no.
Oh.
So, you know what I mean? So it's so I had to tell her a story about the guys from Argos to try to throw a flare in the air for her, really.
Yeah.
Just to try to, do whatever I can to make sure she stays safe, right?
Yeah. Well, you can only do what you can do. So,
I think I told you, didn't I tell you that story? Like,
yeah,
Daddy was in a really interesting workshop the other day. These police officers impersonate children. Really, Dad? Why? Well, you see, there's other people out there that do that, and they're not so nice. So these guys do it to catch the bad guys. Oh my God, Dad, that's full on. I'm like, I know. And just leave it at that, right? What else do you do? Right?
I think, and I was asking Violet. She's 13. I said, what do you need? What do you need to know to be able to like learn, like, because there's all these programs and stuff for the kids. And she's like, I'm not doing that, And I'm like, well, what do you need? She's like, we need stories. We need to know stories. We need to know why it matters. And I was just like, yeah, okay. So, none of this like animated stuff and, all this like join the dots and, they don't care about that. It's been, done and dusted. They want real stuff. And I think that's what we need to be doing, is telling them the truth. And I said, even when I spoke to my mum, I interviewed my mum last week, and, I think a little bit like your story, like when I disclosed to mum, that was the first time she disclosed to me. Had I known her story, it would have made me feel a lot more comfortable to come forward, right? It would have made me feel like I wasn't alone. And, I think our kids need to know the stories that relate to them, that matter to them, in order for them to take it more seriously.
Oh, listen, Kel, as you well know, the impact on my life from that one incident is enormous, right?
Yeah.
My inability to have relationships of substance has broken my heart, and I need it to mean something.
Yeah.
I need it to mean something. I want it to mean something, and I want to do something with that, right? Because that's kept me from happiness, really. So it's so important to me to do something good with this, right?
You're doing it now, Scotty.
I'm trying to. I'm trying.
You're doing it right now, brother. You know, and
Yeah.
as I say, we all need to be sticking together. Like, we need community. We need people that see us, and it's unconditional, right? We just get it, and there's no rules. There's no, there's this just unconscious understanding of your experience.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we need people that see us regardless.
Yeah, and again, it's got to mean something, right?
It does, and you're doing it. You're doing it in your work, and you're doing it, like by trying to protect your children. You're doing it by having this conversation. I mean, this is not the first conversation we're going to have. It's not the first conversation, and. Hey, look, did I promise you or threaten you to take part in this interview today? Isn't that what the cops say? I don't know. But yeah, look, it is what you do with it, I think, is really important. Like, a lot of people choose to do nothing and they sit on it and it festers. Like, I go with the Coke bottle analogy, right? Like, you can shake it up or whatever, but if you leave that lid on, it just gets like tighter and tighter and then just freaking explodes and goes everywhere, right? You kind of just have to like let that little bit of steam off like all the time, and then you're not going to have this big issue in the end. So, you do have.
And I guess I'm not saying it was different for you, but for me, like, I guess in the first instance, the capture point was like I'd succeeded at something when only to learn 30 years later that I really hadn't, and then everything just like stacked up in place where I went, oh, that explains why I can't do this and why I'm no good at relating like this, and I'm no good at, or I've chosen these people to be with, or like everything just like, but 30 years after, unfortunately for me, it wasn't earlier, and I fear that for boys because I interviewed 100 guys last year, and I swear like 30% of them had been sexually assaulted when they were kids, and it had just been brushed. Uncle Frank raped me when I was 6. Okay, how do you feel about that? Oh, well, whatever. What do you do? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, well, because you said when you talked to your dad, he just kind of was like, good on you. So it was you said to me it was a bit like a badge of honor for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I thought I'd lost my virginity at 12. Woohoo. Go me, right? But as it turns out, the impact of that was much deeper and, much more impactful than I could ever imagine, to be honest. And like I said, it was probably confusing that I went from that to sort of men's sport 2 years later, because like culturally I had to sort of just shift into harden the fuck up kind of territory.
Yeah.
And in a way that made me kick dust over it. It didn't make me go back there, so to speak. It just made me like kick dirt over it and go, yeah, okay, off we go.
Yeah.
Just happenstance, right? But
yeah, I can imagine it would have been pretty difficult when you're amongst the men in the culture and sport to kind of disclose anything like that.
No, you can't. No way. No, not a chance. Not a chance.
They'd probably perpetuate the whole badge of honor side of it.
Oh, God. The things I heard when I was 14 and 15 in dressing rooms, like, wow. Yeah, really fast path, really fast track to, I don't know, to what? Misogyny, I guess. It was just brutal. Yeah, absolutely brutal.
So you disclosed to your mum much later on in the piece, didn't you?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, that was right. So last year. And then what happened when you disclosed to her?
She was really sad, and she didn't understand why Dad didn't talk to her about it. But and I couldn't explain it to her. She's like, "Why wouldn't he tell me?" I'm like, "I don't know, Mum." But again, like, I really don't want to come off as like I'm pointing fingers at my dad for doing the wrong thing. I really don't.
No.
1983, man. 1983, totally different setting, right? And I was a 12-year-old going on 20, right? So for all intents and purposes, I understand why my dad would, just go, "Oh, okay, maybe you're on that side of the ledger rather than this one," But yeah, it was full on telling Mum. She was full of regret and remorse, and I said to her, "Listen, just make this about me, yeah. Don't make this about Dad. Don't make this about your anger. Don't make this about me, yeah." And she did, and we talked about her experiences as a kid, and yeah. Let's just say that your mum and my mum aren't that different.
Oh, bless.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have a podcast of the four of us on one day.
That would be cool, actually.
Yeah. So that was also basically you're saying that was when your mother disclosed as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, she said things happened to her when she was a kid. Yeah, I don't want to say too much about that.
No, that's okay. I guess the point I want to make is that conversations are really fucking powerful. Like, it gives other people permission to share their stories, and I think that's what's really important, right?
Do you know what's funny though? Like when Mum said that to me, like I immediately went into panic about my kid. I immediately went into, "Oh wow, it's hereditary. Oh my god."
Really?
Yeah, totally. Like I just went into immediate panic about, "Oh my god, it's a thing." I had suspected about my mum, but I didn't know. And then when she told me, I immediately panicked about my daughter.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, the power of one, my friend, one incident and how it's affected you, and then one conversation and how important that is. I just think, and again, I have some major reflections from last week, not last week, the last conversation I had with my mom about how long we stay silent for, trying to protect the people that we love. And I think we miss out on so much freaking life by holding on to these secrets, which we honestly believe are protecting people, but it's only protecting the perpetrator.
It's so funny you should say that. Like I have such a vivid memory of leaving my psychologist's office, and I called my very best mate, and I've been mates with him since we were 10. So I'm 52. It's a few years. And I called him and said, "Hey, Cutsy, mate, do you know how I lost my virginity when I was 12? And he goes, "Yeah." Well, so it turns out that wasn't really my intention. And we both cried. We just both cried. And he said, "I'm so sorry, mate." And I cried too. But yeah, it was huge. I'll never forget that moment. It was my very best mate.
He was in there with you, mate. Like you need people in your life like that, hey, that are gonna sit with you through the hard stuff, And I appreciate how hard this is for you, Scott. Like you're doing a good job. I promise.
Hey, trying to keep up.
Oh, mate, you're doing a good job. You still look good, all right? You're nice and shiny over there. But yeah, look,
my fake tan, Kel.
A Melbourne tan.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it does, and I guess I want to make a point here to anyone who's listening. It doesn't matter if it happens once, if it happens 10 times, 50 times, or it's just standard. You can't measure trauma, right? You can't measure one incident against many incidents. It's all a betrayal of trust. It's all shame. It all hurts. It all fucking hurts, right? And I really, and not so much for survivors, because I don't think survivors do it to each other too much, but a lot of other people out there, when they're trying to talk to survivors, say, well, at least this didn't happen, or, oh, well, it was just the one time. Well, it's not just the one time. And when you say that, it actually undermines the survivor's experience. So if you're supporting someone who's experiencing child abuse, don't phrase it like that. Like, be mindful of how you're talking to somebody, because saying the word just in any sentence is undermining that person's experience. So just be mindful, be really mindful of how you phrase that, because one or many, and it comes down to, I think, our experiences too. Like, we both grew up in sport. You and I are both very resilient people. I grew up throwing hammers, jumping barbed wire fences, and sprinting and soccer and athletics and you name it. So I threw myself into my sport. So I was very resilient. But it's always the old Aussie tall poppy syndrome thing, when to beat down the other person. And when it comes to this stuff, you kind of need to be lifting each other up. You really, really do.
Like, let's put it in perspective, right? So I went to bed until I was 13. So this happened to me before I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
Let's put that in perspective, right? So, obviously I was anxious or whatever as a kid, but put that in perspective. Like, I had no adulting in me at all at that point, right? And yeah, it was only one time, but it ain't less meaningful because of it.
Right? No, that's right. And I really want people to know that from our conversation, because it does matter. And again, our experiences determine how we cope too. If you don't have good people in your life, you don't have people to talk to or share your experiences with, or it makes it really hard to work out what strategies to put in place and how to deal with it. So you've left your healing, like me, until very late in the piece. But what?
Yeah, that's something I'm really sad about, to be honest. Like, my life could have been really different. Hey, it could have been really different had I attacked this earlier, right?
Yeah.
But it hasn't been. It's been really painful and really awkward for me, actually. Particularly in trying to find love. It's been really difficult.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've only just found the right person for me, so it's taken me a long time to work it out as well. So
I just had a chat with her this afternoon. She said it's done. Yeah, it's
fine. Oh my god! Well, it's hard, because but I also did a lot of, sabotage. Like, you think I did what you were talking about before. When things are getting really good, I'm like, oh, this is a great relationship, but do something stupid, or I think something's wrong when something's actually not wrong at all, and I'll sabotage that good thing. And it's not just relationships, but it might be jobs or promotions or whatever it is in your life that you actually like getting good at. You fuck it up for yourself because you don't think you deserve it, right? Yeah. And so it just puts you back into this cycle. And so breaking this cycle of trauma is not just one step. It's lots of little steps in lots of different areas of your life, and it's constantly being brave, like all the time, and pushing through that stuff. So I'm trying to get a healing course together for survivors, so stay tuned for that. But it's going to be pretty epic.
Okay, I'm there. Okay,
yeah, it'll be good. Don't worry about that. But yeah, like what would you I guess coming from the male side of things, what would you tell the men out there who are listening? Like, how would you encourage them?
I'm really glad you raised that, actually. Last year when I interviewed 100 guys in 100 days, boy, oh boy, that was, for me, it was pretty epic. Like, it was pretty full on. Like, there were times where I just finished a day and went, oh my God, I need to go for a walk. I need to, we have, I believe, as men, like a glass floor where we will not talk about things that really deeply hurt us. Where we will not talk about vulnerabilities in relationships. Where we will not talk about how we don't feel enough with our partner or with, and we have to work through that glass floor, because so many times it was so easy for men to say to me, this thing happened to me that was brutal. And I'd be like, okay, that's shit. How do you feel about that? All right.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. No, you don't. So, yeah, I'm actually working with a guy, Andrew, out of Canada, where we're trying to get some programs together to get guys to work through that glass floor, because we just cannot. We don't seem to be able to express those deeply traumatic and emotional experiences that we have as men,
Yeah.
because it's just kind of, it's not kosher.
Yeah.
Like, you sit around and talk to guys at sport and stuff and go, it's so unusual if a bloke said, she really hurt me. She made me feel like this. Shit doesn't happen, right? Just go, yeah, it's over with her. Don't know what happened there. It's not true, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not true. We have, we are deeply emotional beings, just like women, but we just can't get in and say it. And I'm so dedicated to making that happen for men, because it's such a game changer, right? We need to be able to jump into that and share.
Do you think that people are afraid of men who are really vulnerable like that? Do you think it's a conversation that scares women, or do you think they would like it? Like, I mean,
It's really funny, actually.
I know
There was
that's
an
probably a
article.
weird question, but like, I mean, I've got a female partner, so we talk about emotional stuff, so it's all right.
Yeah, it's really funny you should say that. So, two things. Firstly, my interviews with homosexual men were no different than straight men, in terms of that barrier for sharing.
Mm.
Um, and secondly, there was an article about 3 years ago, why men don't have friends and women pay the price or pay the burden or whatever it was.
Yeah,
And I was
right.
like, what?
What's that about?
So that is literally about men opening up and women going, oh, that's a pain in the ass. So, and for guys, I think it's, again, I've had so many conversations with blokes and written a lot of articles about it, but yeah, we want that feminine energy because we're able to share emotionally. We're not able to do that with our male friends,
Yeah.
right? And so when we're in partnership, that's when we open up the most, right? And so, but then to be called burdens because we're opening up too much in relationship is kind of like, oh, okay, where do I go now? Because I don't actually have anywhere else to go.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
interesting. Like I noticed, obviously, because I work a lot with domestic violence and all that sort of stuff, and the biggest issue is always a massive lack of communication. It's always
Totally.
comes down to those conversations and that hard stuff, and not being able to talk about emotions honestly and safely. Like, that safety thing doesn't exist, and that's the big part. It's like they don't feel safe to have the conversation for fear of how the person's going to respond, or this explosiveness that happens, and you're like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that explosion, so they don't have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
we avoid it.
yeah, exactly. And it just causes pain for everybody, because then you make up stories, right? You make up stories in the silence about what the other person's thinking, or they hate me, or they don't love me anymore, or, they don't want to be with me, or they found somebody else with the cheating, or, there's this big friggin' like dialogue that happens in the background, and you make up your mind about something that's not even true.
Mm-hmm.
Not even true, right? That's how.
Yeah, true.
That's why you got to have these conversations. As soon as something pops up, you're like, oh, I'm not really sure what's going on there. Like, talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and it is. Look, there's a long journey ahead for males around this, in my view. We just need to practice.
Yeah.
Like, we need to practice having these conversations, right? Like, I can, even with my best mate, like, God, 42 years of friendship, and I could say, oh, blah blah, it's broken my heart. I feel like, yeah, it's pretty shit, isn't it, mate? It's like, Okay, that conversation's over. Cool. We're not going any deeper into that. That's fine. Okay. We're just terrible at it.
You need to have like, oh, he's the emotional kind of guy. He's the guy that I go to for the straight answers, and he's the guy that I want some hard love from. Like you gotta have all your little friends in categories.
We are absolutely shit at it. There's no question about it.
Yeah. Right. So, have you got any?
And it leaves us feeling isolated and alone, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Or at least anyone feeling isolated and alone if they can't talk to anyone about what's going on safely.
Correct.
So,
correct.
Yeah, right.
You were saying.
Anything else you'd like to share with the men out there who've got a story, who might be thinking of disclosing, have never disclosed?
Call me. Let's have a chat. Like, I get it. I know what it's about. Yeah. And God damn it, I want to make a difference. And it's tough being a dude when something's happened to you that shouldn't have happened to you. Like, there's shame involved in that. I'm not saying it's any less for a woman, but for blokes who feel like they should be able to protect themselves, victimology is so much harder emotionally. You just don't. Yeah, you don't even want to go there. So, call me.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
have a chat.
So just quickly, Scotty, on that, like what on the victimology and the difficultness. I can speak great English. The difficulty. Thank you. For men when they, with that shame, like what insight can you give into that?
Well, look, what I can say is that I didn't openly share my trauma with anyone for a long, long time, 30 years, in fact. So I know what it's like to hold on to it. I know the damage that it does. And I know why it's so easy to keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, Scotty, we've got so much we can unpack over the next couple of months when we do this. I'm sure we'll come back on and do some deep dives, particularly for men who want to jump on. We just got a couple of questions. So there's many survivors working in areas to reduce and prevent child sexual abuse. Do you think that you would have followed this career path if not for your personal experience? So that's for you.
Did I really follow this career path? I didn't chase it. I got asked to get involved, and at the time, absolutely, it felt meaningful to me, but also felt really confronting for me at the same time. So it wasn't like I was like, oh yeah, it was like I was like, oh maybe. So definitely it's meaningful because of my own experience, and definitely I want to make a difference because of my own experience. But I hesitantly moved forward into that space.
Yeah, all right. I think too, for me, like it wasn't a conscious thought really. It was always in me that I had to do it. And then and then my ADHD popcorn brain just kept adding ideas to that, and I'm completely overwhelmed.
Look, hey, if I can help, like mathematically or
I can't add up, Scotty. I don't even know how to do that.
So no, but I mean it. If I can help in any way tangibly for anyone, I'd love to, because it's caused such an enormous amount of pain in my life.
Yeah.
I cannot understate that. It really has.
Yeah, right. Well, you got it, guys. You got two people here willing to help. So there you go. There's two more questions there. So another one from Mel is: did you or have you considered reporting your abuser?
I did, and it's a really good question, actually. My mum asked me the same thing. And my hypothesis was quite simply that she was 17, 18. And so I figured something had happened to her for that to happen. And so, it had been such a long time past as well that I was just like, well, really? She's had an experience that's led her to this sort of space. And There's no need for me to cause more harm, really. Maybe that sounds like I'm a bit of a martyr, but I just didn't see the point.
Yeah, I think it's really hard because you have to feel right about making that decision to report for yourself. It has to be right.
I didn't feel like there was. I didn't feel like there was enough for me in it, right? Like, what would I gain out of it?
Yeah,
and I didn't feel like I would gain anything out of it, right? Because 3 decades had gone by, yeah, and so my first thought was, what happened to her?
yeah. But I think too, though, many victim survivors, they want to protect the people around them. It's just, I mean, I did too. Like, I know it sounds really stupid, but I wanted to protect my uncle. Like, I really haven't really talked about this.
No, I get it.
But like, there's someone, it's hard. There's a thing that happens with survivors. It's called splitting, right? And you restore the good part of the person who you know and you trust and who's, you know, involved in your life and your family. And then the other part of you goes, I know that's bad, and that's my bad uncle or my bad friend or my bad brother or dad or whoever it is. That's the bad dad, but I still love them because of these reasons, right? So it's really hard and it's really fucking confusing for people to be sitting in this space as a child with someone who's completely betrayed you, but someone that you completely love, right? And so it's really, really confusing. So when it comes to reporting, it's really difficult. And that's where a lot of the silence and the shame comes from, obviously, as you know. But how to break that, and you have to feel right in yourself, you know. But as a child, you cannot give consent. You absolutely cannot give consent. So, you know, it shouldn't be on the child. It should never be on the child to have to report. Never. So, you know, that's a massive conversation for another time. But it definitely, it's a difficult decision to make that report. I believe you should always tell someone. I think, as I even spoke to my mum about last week, telling someone is the first step to being able to get healing, to get closure. And at least you were able to have a conversation with your dad, not the best conversation, but someone knew about it in your circle, you know. Probably.
And my mum, within a week of each other, by the way.
Yeah. So, you know, but you've got to be able to tell somebody, and if you don't have anyone in your immediate family that you can trust, you've got to have somebody else who's in your circle of influence who you can go to, you know. And if you don't have, so there's a women's group on my network that you can join. I do plan to open a men's group, and I do plan to open parents groups, but we just got to get the one group going first. So
let's take the time. Yep.
That's right. So look, it's all happening, but yes. So there's just one more question from Ange. What age do you speak about it to your kids? And
wow, that's a really good question.
My answer to that, as soon as they know how to understand you, because protective behaviors education needs to happen very young, probably age of 3 or 4, where the child can identify their body parts, they can name specific parts of their body so that they can disclose effectively, right? The issue is a lot of people go, oh, I'm like, I don't want to scare my kids and all that sort of stuff. And I understand that because it's really tough to have that conversation.
Like that.
Yeah. But if you don't have that conversation and a perpetrator takes advantage of your child, they then cannot disclose, right? And if you can't disclose to the police, then the police don't investigate it, pretty much. That's how it kind of, I mean, they will, but if it's not a clear disclosure, the police have a very difficult time in basically investigating the incident, okay? Because it's like if you said, and this is probably really not the best example, but you know, if you give the penis a nickname and call it a hockey stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, or the bat, a bat,
okay, sure,
a bat, or whatever. But maybe the perpetrator calls it that, right? So, you know, let's call the kid Johnny, little Johnny, and you know, perpetrator commits a sexual offense against little Johnny, and he goes home and says, "Mom, this fella's played with my bat today." You either miss a disclosure or you're not hearing it right for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when the child discloses, then they're saying, well, what actually happened? right? Because you can't lead a child. So teaching the child the correct anatomical names of the body parts actually saves court. It saves issues with cross-examinations and those types of things. You know, it's getting a lot easier for children in courts now because they are obviously reviewing things. But failing to teach kids the correct body names and anatomical parts is setting them up if something does happen to fail. So just don't make it awkward. Just have the conversation. So many resources out there that you can be looking at. Think You Know's got heaps of stuff for online. There's heaps of books out there now. The Daniel Morcombe Foundation's got great resources. Bravehearts has great resources. So just check out their websites. But yeah, do not have. You need to have the conversation with kids because it takes away the fear.
I haven't done that.
Yeah. Well, it takes away the fear too, right? If you don't have a conversation about it, then all of a sudden something happens and you start freaking out, the child freaks out too. But if you make it part of your everyday language, then when there's a conversation to be had about it, they're not upset or scared or ashamed to talk about it, right? It's about normalizing the conversations every day. I mean, I could talk for hours on this particular topic, but yeah.
Food for thought, Kel.
Look, it needs to be coupled with, you know, good parental guidance. Obviously, there needs to be a parent in there talking and, you know, having these conversations. And I don't think, I mean, it's probably too young for 3 or 4 or 5 to have a conversation about your story, but I believe children should have an idea that you have a lived experience of some sort and have an age-appropriate conversation about your experience with the child. You know, at an age where they can understand. And the reason for that is I just don't believe children, like if they've got something going on, they're trapped in something that should feel like that they're alone, right? Particularly like, I mean, I was silent for so many years and my mum had this story and I didn't know. And as soon as she told me, so she disclosed, and it's like, oh my God, I've been hiding this secret for my whole life. And my abuse started when I was 8, right? And had I known, maybe things could have been different. I'm not blaming my mother at all. God, never, because it's the only person whose fault this is my fucked up uncle's fault, right? He's the only one to blame. But at the end of the day, we hide our stories from the ones that we love because we're so afraid to hurt them.
It's very true.
We hurt people more by hiding our secrets.
I need to change that.
We really do.
I haven't done that yet. So I will have to do. She's nearly 14, so I'll have to do that soon, I think.
I really encourage you to do that. And it doesn't have to be War and Peace. It can be like something happened when I was 12 and I didn't give consent.
Yeah.
You know, and I struggled because of these reasons. And, you know, it doesn't have to be much, but it's just enough for the child. Because kids are not stupid. We believe these kids don't actually, like, we pussyfoot around, we bubble wrap these kids. We don't talk to them about the things that we should be talking to them about because we think we're going to upset them or scare them. I guarantee you they're doing shit that you don't even want to know that they're doing. They're learning stuff from their peers at school. You know, they're, you know, a lot ahead of where you think they are. So don't underestimate your kids is basically what I'm saying. You know, you're trying to protect them, but you're protecting them by not talking to them is not protecting them.
Fair play.
So
fair play. On board. Got it. Yeah. Will action.
I say that with all the love in my heart, people. And I say that because I know from personal experience and I know from the 360 women in my women's support group at the moment and all of their stories, you know, these conversations need to happen. And I just really encourage you not to hide your secrets from the people that you love the most. And if they're not supportive people, if they're not people that are in your corner when you're cornered, they're not meant to be in the same room with you, right? At the end of the day, if they're not supportive, they're not your people.
And Mel, that's a great point. I saw your comment. I don't even know how to reply to the comments, but I agree.
So there's so much going on, obviously. There's lots of chats and stuff, lots of questions. And during the live recordings, because obviously for those who are listening to the podcast later, we record this show live. and it gives the people opportunity to ask questions that we can answer in real time. So if you are hearing this on the podcast, that's what's going on. There's questions being answered. And you can subscribe to my Patreon account where you will be able to get exclusive interviews. So Scotty and I have already done a pre-interview interview, and there'll be live Q&As and those types of things, which you can only get through Patreon. So you can go to patreon.com/Kelly Humphries, and you can see it below. Okay, cool. So we are done for the evening, guys. So I want to thank you all for being part of the audience. Obviously, there's been some tough things said tonight. So if you need any assistance whatsoever, you can go to my website, kellyhumphries.com, and there is some numbers for support there, which you can reach out to. In the meantime, we'll see you again in a fortnight's time for another episode of Off the Cuff with Kel.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kel. You're a legend.
Thank you, Scotty.
All righty. Cheers.